Lemon Tiara was standing next to the door at her father's office. She just finished talking to the doctor, an old, dark blue unicorn with a gray mane who spent almost an hour asking her lots of questions. Now the doctor was talking to Filthy Rich. Lemon Tiara sighed. It was just like any other meeting with a doctor. Before they met, he looked through the results of her checkup to find out that her level of hormones was normal, as well as the results of her ECG, EEG, CT, and other stuff she couldn't even remember. Silver Spoon would probably know what those acronyms meant, but Diamond Tiara hadn't seen her since Pipsqueak's funeral. Then, the doctor visited her in her room. He introduced himself as Midline Shift, and immediately told her that she could call him Midline. "I want to ask you a few questions, Diamond," he said. "Hopefully I'll be able to help you." She noticed that he wasn't taking any notes. In fact, only one of the doctors she'd seen was doing that. Even then, he'd spent 10 minutes explaining to her why he had to do that. "Why do you feel... what do you like to do in your free time?" Midline Shift asked. "Well, I usually play alone with my friend, Silver Spoon," Diamond Tiara replied. "I like to make jewelry. That's how I got my cutie mark." She talked about it for about 10 minutes. She told Midline Shift how she liked everything to be in perfect order. There was something about the symmetry of the tiaras, necklaces, and bracelets she was designing that was calming her down. Midline Shift was listening, only occasionally asking her some more questions. "Is Silver Spoon your only friend?" he asked when she paused to catch her breath. "No, I have lost of friends," Diamond replied. It wasn't exactly true. Most of them were just her followers. She knew they only liked her because she was rich. "Silver's just my best friend." Midline Shift nodded. "How often do you meet?" "Almost every day." Diamond Tiara hesitated. Since Sunday, they'd only talked at school. Pipsqueak's death shook Silver Spoon. On Wednesday, she had to leave class during the lesson, crying. Diamond Tiara thought that she needed the doctor's help more than her. There was also another reason. Diamond Tiara was almost sure that she was the pony who had taken a stone and smashed Pipsqueak's skull with it. Who else could it be? He was alive when she saw him then. Something happened, and she ran away. She didn't want Silver Spoon to be around if something like that happened again. "When I came here, I heard about this colt who'd died recently," Midline Shift said. "Was he also your friend?" "Yes," Diamond Tiara replied quickly. She remembered the last time they talked and shuddered. "But I couldn't sleep a long time before he died." Midline Shift nodded. "How about your mother?" he asked. "She died when I was 3, Diamond Tiara replied. "I barely remember her. She died in an accident. Dad often says that I'm similar to her. She liked to have everything organized."
"I see," said Midline Shift, looking around the room. "How about your father?"
"He worries me," Diamond Tiara replied. "He can't sleep too." She knew what was coming next. Sooner or later, every doctor would ask her if she was beaten or molested. They were usually circling around that question for long. They were asking her about her biggest fear, about Filthy Rich's reaction if she did something wrong, if some pony ever put her hooves where they shouldn't. Diamond Tiara answered all of Midline Shift's questions with a bored expression. The doctor was about to leave when he asked her about something else. "Do you have any problems with your vision or hearing?" That caught her off guard. She hesitated for a while before replying, "No." "Well, Diamond," she thought. "You don't have any problems. It was just once."
"Did you have any thoughts that made you scared or angry?"
Midline Shift asked. "All the time," she muttered. "I haven't slept for a month. It's normal that I'm angry."
"Yes, it's normal,"
Midline Shift replied.
"Thank you, Diamond. You talk with your father now."
When he left her room, she listened to his hoof steps till she heard the door to Filthy Rich's room open. Quietly, she trotted down and stood in the corridor next to her father's office. Physically,
"She's okay,"
she heard Midline Shift's voice. However, she seems to be obsessed with order and symmetry. Was she always like that?
No, of course not,
Filthy Rich replied.
I mean, she always liked putting things in order, just like Amber. But only recently she started to do that all the time. She says that she's bored at night.
I see, Midline Shift said. Diamond Tiara could almost see him nodding with his professional expression.
Mr. Rich, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you a couple questions about your wife.
Diamond Tiara turned away from the door. It seemed that they were going to talk for long, which was boring her. Suddenly, she started to miss Silver Spoon, so she decided to go to the town and look for her. Walking through the streets of Ponyville, she started to wander. She hadn't been caught yet. When Rumble, or Featherweight, found Pipsqueak's body, they immediately ran to the town, calling for help. The guards who arrived at the meadow in the early morning photographed and measured all the hoof prints and traces they could find. The body had been taken to the hospital. Diamond Tiara shuddered, imagining the colt lying on the metal table with a bloody hole in his skull. She remembered how she'd showered after coming back to the walk in the night, how she'd assumed that blood on her coat came from her wounds. Was it Pipsqueak's? She didn't know. She had rinsed all the evidence down the drain. She started to wonder what would happen if they found out that she was there with him. At first she thought about prison. Cold, dirty walls, bars on the windows, or deranged mares lurking in the shadows to hurt her. Then she shook it off. No pony in Equestria would lock 9-year-old fillies in jail. There was also another thing. In all the books she'd read, the criminals usually plead insanity to be locked in an asylum, where they could easily escape. In those books, a brave detective or smart lawyer could easily see through that plot and thwart the villain's plans at the last moment. This, however, wasn't a book. As much as Diamond Tiara didn't want to admit it, she lost control over her body and killed Pipsqueak. Or something in her did. She wasn't sure anymore. Hey, watch out! She realized she'd almost bumped into another filly. A rose unicorn with 3 gems as a cutie mark. She knew her from school. Her name was Ruby Pinch. It's you, Ruby muttered, frowning. She backpedaled, glaring at Diamond Tiara angrily. Does she know? Diamond Tiara thought, panicked. You came to laugh at me again? Ruby shouted, her eyes watering. You really think it's funny? What would you do if your mother... Suddenly, she turned back and ran. Diamond! Ruby, wait! Diamond Tiara shouted. She wanted to chase her, but then she sat down, realizing what it was about. After they'd noticed that Applebloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetiebelle didn't care about their insults anymore, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon started to look for a new victim. Ruby Pinch, with her alcoholic mother and second hoof handbooks, was a far too easy target. Diamond Tiara hesitated. Normally, she'd shrug it off and go to Silver Spoon, but recently she'd seen too many ponies crying because of her. She'd barely made it through Pipsqueak's funeral. The whole town had appeared to be there as well to bid farewell to the poor colt. Diamond Tiara couldn't look into their eyes. When Shirley started to cry during her speech, for a brief moment Diamond Tiara thought that her teacher was going to accuse her. She'd imagined the ponies gathering around her, glaring at her angrily. She imagined herself running to Filthy Rich, only to be pushed away by him. A pair of strong hoofs wrapping around her throat, depriving her of air. Her tiara lying on the ground where it was smashed to pieces. She imagined herself trying to fight, overpowered by the mob, ponies kicking her and tearing hairs from her mane. She imagined them dumping her, dirty, bleeding, and with numerous wounds, into Pipsqueak's grave. She looked up and saw Silver Spoon, staring at her emotionlessly. Silver, help me, she coughed. Silver Spoon said nothing. Instead, she grabbed a hooful of earth and threw it at her. The other ponies joined, burying Diamond Tiara alive. Diamond, are you okay? Silver Spoon asked, looking at her unsurely. Diamond Tiara only pulled at her with a hug, and spent the rest of the funeral crying to her coat. They hadn't seen each other since then. Now, Diamond Tiara looked in the direction where Ruby had ran. What a crybaby, she finally muttered and headed to Silver Spoon's house. She didn't even have to knock at the door. When she approached the manor, she saw Silver Spoon through the fence, lying on a blanket underneath a tree in the garden. Hello, Diamond Tiara called. Silver Spoon yawned and looked around groggily. Seeing her slowly waking up, Diamond Tiara sighed. She'd give anything to be able to sleep like that. "Hi, Diamond," said Silver Spoon, letting her in. They trotted to the tree and sat at the blanket. "How are you?" "Still can't sleep," Diamond Tiara replied, looking at the book Silver had been using as a pillow. A large black neurology handbook. "Do you even understand that?" "Not really," Silver Spoon blushed. "But I'm trying, Diamond. I'm really trying. And I don't deserve that," Diamond Tiara thought. "You know, I talked to that doctor at Trottingham today," she said. "What's he like?" Silver asked. "Just like any other. You think there's something wrong in my head," Diamond Tiara sighed. "You know, all that cleaning and stuff. As if it had something to do with my insomnia. Now he's talking to my dad." Silver Spoon nodded. For a while, they were just sitting next to each other in silence. "You know, I met Ruby Pinch on the way here," Diamond Tiara said. "Who?" Silver Spoon asked. "Wait, isn't it that pathetic kid? The one whose mother would sell her for vodka?" She laughed coldly. "What did she tell you? How fun it is to clean vomit from the floor?" "I was just thinking that maybe we've been a little too harsh for her," Diamond Tiara said, not looking at her friend. Silver Spoon's smile faded instantly. "Yeah, I was just thinking that," she muttered. "I mean, hard for her to live like that." "There you are, friend," Diamond Tiara thought. "If I told you now that Ruby is a retard, you'd spend the rest of the day thinking of new insults, wouldn't you?" There was only one time when Silver Spoon stood up against her. 2 years before, Twist had refused to let Diamond copy her homework, and, after a rather unpleasant talk with Cheerilee, Diamond had decided to turn Twist's life into hell. She hadn't even started with that. When she'd told Silver Spoon about her plan, she suddenly saw her face freezing in horror, before Silver blurted out, "No!" trying to hold back tears. Diamond Tiara was surprised that she didn't see that coming. Only later she remembered where she'd heard someone being called a four-eyed retard before. They never talked about it again, nor Diamond Tiara ever tried to bully Twist again. "Don't you think we should apologize?" Silver asked. "Apologize? No, I don't like her that much," Diamond said. "Yeah, you're probably right." And Silver Spoon looked around uncomfortably. "Jeez, grow up here, girl," as Scootaloo would say, Diamond Tiara thought. Wonder what pair that blank flank meant. Pair of wings? She could grow a working one as well. She snickered. Then she looked at Silver Spoon, who was silently sitting there, her eyes focused on some random tuft of grass in front of her. "Silver, are you okay?" she asked. "It's Pipsqueak. I still can't believe that he's gone," Silver Spoon whispered. "Just what I needed." Diamond Tiara sighed and sat next to Silver Spoon, wrapping her hoof around her. She was so used to happy, mischievous Silver Spoon that she'd almost forgotten how vulnerable she could be. Deep inside, she'd always known that her friend's unusual behavior was merely a mask. She was hanging out with Diamond, agreeing to every word, forget how she used to be bullied herself. Silver, Babseed, do I have real friends or just followers? Diamond Tiara thought. She was often pondering about that during the sleepless nights. Not that it bothered her. It was just one of the questions that were popping into her head. They spent several hours sitting together, barely saying anything. Every time Diamond Tiara tried to talk about something else, Silver was coming back to Pipsqueak or Diamond's insomnia. Finally, Diamond had had enough. "I gotta go," she said, looking at the sun. "Take care, Silver." She trotted out of Silver's garden and walked down through the town. The afternoon was warm. The streets were full of ponies, talking cheerfully and enjoying themselves. Suddenly, Diamond Tiara froze mid-step and blinked several times. She realized that she was in the town's outskirts again. She couldn't tell how she got there, barely paying attention to where she was walking. What the? she muttered, looking around. It was in the meadow. It wasn't, however, the same part where she'd met Pipsqueak a week before. Behind her, there was a steep river bank covered in bushes and small trees. She was about to head back to her house when she heard some pony crying. She looked at the group of bushes and noticed something dark pink among them. "Ruby?" she asked, approaching the filly, who was sitting on the grass looking at the river. Several scared moths flew past her. She looked at the steep river bank and shivered. She was scared of heights. She was 3, her mother was on a trip in the mountains. While climbing up the narrow path, a sudden headwind threw her off balance, and she fell 500 meters down. Tiara hadn't seen that, but since then she couldn't look down the chasm without the cold feeling overwhelming her. "You again?" Ruby asked. "Why'd you leave me alone?" Tiara shuddered. She noticed that the edges of her vision became blurry. She wanted to run away instantly, but instead she trotted to Ruby and sat next to her. Overcoming her fear, she looked down at the river, the stream where there was a rapid. They were maybe a mile from the hydroelectric dam. "Listen," Tiara said. "It's not like that. You what? After all those things that you and that pet of yours said about me, you think that it's not like that will help?" Ruby whimpered. "No," Tiara muttered. She extended her hoof and wrapped it around Ruby. "No, Ruby, it's... Run, Ruby. Don't you run away from me." It all lasted maybe half a second. Diamond's vision suddenly disappeared in a flash, and when it came back, Ruby wasn't with her. "Tiara!" She heard a panicked scream. She blinked and ran to the edge of the bank and looked down. "No!" she shouted, seeing Ruby disappearing, desperately waving her hooves, trying to keep her head above the water. "Hold on, Ruby," Tiara muttered. She tried to run behind her, but suddenly her hooves became weak, unable to support their weight. She could only sit there and watch Ruby struggle to get into the bank. Ruby disappeared, but quickly emerged, coughing and hitting her hooves against the water erratically. "Diamond!" It wasn't even a scream. It was a shriek which ended with a sob. "Why?" "Hold on!" Tiara cried. "Why?" Ruby cried. Muscles in her legs spasmed. She exhaled the air and disappeared underwater. Her hooves didn't want to listen to her. The bottom of the river was so serene. Cold calmness was welcoming. Ruby closed her eyes and inhaled, water filling her lungs immediately. Her mind started to fall apart, yet Ruby didn't care. She looked up and saw a distorted image of Diamond Tiara looking at the surface of the river. Why she seemed so important to her? Ruby Pinch didn't know. She faintly remembered something about crying, but waved that thought off. She wasn't going to cry anymore. The Prancing Changeling pub in the middle of Ponyville was full of ponies. Even though it was late, they were drinking and chatting happily, celebrating another warm June weekend. Lionel Scratch was in her element. She wasn't working that night, so she could just drink and enjoy herself with her friends, Octavia, Lyra, and Bonbon. And then I said... She waved her hoof in the air and took a sip of her cider. "Honey, that's not my horn. It's that guy's." The rest drowned in the laughter of her companions. "And what did he say?" Lyra asked when the laughter died down. "I knew it. It's even harder than your horn." Lionel giggled. "Seriously, I think Neon likes stallions." "Really?" Bonbon shook her head. "And why isn't he with you?" "He's not just with me. It's the two of us." Vinyl poked Octavia. "Octi has sass, and I have a nice..." Before Vinyl could finish, the door busted open. The pub suddenly went silent. All the patrons looked at the pony who entered the building, staggering slightly. Thanks to Minette, who talked to a couple ponies, Berry Punch was currently banned from every pub and liquor store in Ponyville. No pony had an idea how she managed to get so wasted. Berry looked around, examining the faces of the patrons. Suddenly, her eyes locked on Vinyl. You! She slurred, approaching her. Where's my daughter, bitch? What? Vinyl looked at her unsurely. I haven't seen your daughter. She disappeared today and still isn't back, Barry shouted. The smell of vodka and sweat. Vinyl shuddered upon smelling it. You must have done something with her. Listen, Barry. I don't know why you're thinking that I abduct fillies, but that's just dumb. Vinyl snapped. I don't even like kids. Get off me. Don't bullshit me, Scratch, Barry yelled. Some of the patrons sat under their tables. Listen. Vinyl stood up, approaching Barry. Look at my mouth. I didn't touch your daughter. Got it? Now get out. Barry glared at her angrily, baring her teeth. Just look at yourself, said Vinyl, rolling her eyes and putting her sunglasses on. I'm not surprised if she'd prefer to run away than stay with you. Suddenly, Vinyl felt as if her head exploded. She landed on the table, which collapsed under her weight. The mugs smashed into the air, covering it in shards of glass and puddles of cider. Barry screamed and darted forward to hit Vinyl again. Lyra and Bon Bon stood up and tackled her, pinning her to the ground, while Octavia shielded Vinyl with her own body. You're sick, Vinyl muttered, wiping blood from her muzzle. Barry thrashed in Lyra and Bon Bon's grasp and began yelling obscenities at them. Shit, you knocked my tooth out. Vinyl picked up her broken sunglasses, examining them, and threw them onto the ground again. Fuck you, Barry replied. Vinyl only sighed. She stood up slowly, examining her wounds. Her white coat was covered in cider, ketchup, and blood from the cuts. The bartender approached them. He looked at the broken table and shook his head. Then he turned to Vinyl. Are you good, or should I call the guards? He asked. Vinyl said nothing. Adrenaline was slowly evaporating from her system, but she felt pain in her muzzle and began to realize that she was covered in blood. Even the faintest trace of it was usually making her feel dizzy. You'd better call the guards, Octavia replied, glaring at Barry, who was still trying to free herself and reach Vinyl. I'd rather not pull them apart again. The night was slowly getting cold. Vinyl lit a cigarette with her magic and blew out the smoke, watching the patterns that formed before her. Octavia coughed. Vinyl, could you not blow it in my face? I thought you don't smoke anymore. Oh, sorry, Vinyl replied. I'm just in a cigarette mood. Not the I just got punched in the face mood? Lyra asked, laughing. They were walking through Ponyville outskirts, enjoying the night. Or at least Octavia, Lyra, and Bon Bon were enjoying the night. That's not funny, Lyra, Vinyl said. I don't know why, but the ponies in this town treat me like a fucking zebra. Too much noise, Scratch's fault. Vomit on your doormat, Scratch was there. Can't raise your kids, Scratch came and ate it. My foals, I don't like them. Why have I ever needed them? I already live in that fancy pench thing with Octi and Neon. Well, to be honest, you can be a bit noisy, Octavia prompted. Not to mention the doormat. It could be worse, Bon Bon muttered. They could accuse you of blowing up the library. Yeah, there's probably someone out there who thinks that I suddenly grew a pair of heads and dyed my coat red and black. Lyra rolled her eyes. Lyra, is it even possible to grow hands? There are genetic mutations that cause that, Lyra replied. But they appear instead of front hooves. Such kids usually have their inborn defects and don't live long. Exactly, Vinyl nodded, ignoring Octavia and Bon Bon's groans of imagining a disfigured foal. I didn't blow up the library, but still I apparently keep foals in my sex dungeon, or at least that permanently intoxicated tosser thinks so. Vinyl rolled her eyes, trying to ignore Octavia telling her that a basement with a couple of Wonderbolt pin-up posters plastered to the wall could barely be called a sex dungeon. Well, if my sister disappeared, I'd be worried too, Bonbon said. I can kind of understand her.
Yeah, but you'd just be worried.
Lionel stepped on a bridge and turned back to her companions.
Mary got drunk and tried to beat the crap out of me. In fact, I'm gonna apply for a restraining order. Who knows how messed she is. Today she beats ponies, tomorrow she'll try to burn our house down.
Lionel tossed the cigarette butt into the river and watched it fall.
Oh,
She muttered, looking at the surface of the water below. She staggered slightly and lit her horn.
ah, shit.
She whispered, her throat dry.
Lyra, can you get me more light?
Lyra approached the railing and lit her horn, looking down. Her magic was much lighter than Vinyl's. It reflected from the water, basking them in a golden light. Octavia looked at the water and put her hoof to her mouth, seeing a small silhouette stuck between the pillars of the bridge. Bonbon overcame with nausea and looked at it closer. Then she turned to her friends, her face pale. Is that Barry's kid? She asked in a shaky voice, perfectly knowing what the answer would be.